I just send a bunch of topics. There we go.
I read through that. I think we're good to go.
Yeah.
We'll play it off by ear.
We can edit this later. Y'all can keep talking and it's fine. Like, I'm going to edit the hell out of this. I got to edit me saying, which saves us like 10 minutes on every episode. We'll see how well that works. All right, folks, welcome. This is season 16. We are past the midway point. We are all the way up to episode 7 at this point. And this was something that Byron recommended to us, and so we've got Byron here, and we dragged Rocky into this as well, because we're talking about aerial shooty-bangy stuff tonight, and kind of stuff zipping around and flying around. And Rocky had spent some time dealing with the flyboys when he was in the military. It is an area of great interest for Byron and a bunch of his gaming interest as well. And it is something that I don't know a whole lot about, so I'm going to let them be the smart guys with this. And Byron actually sent notes ahead of time so that we can, try to stay on top. We'll see how well that works. So the genesis of all this, though, Byron, where was the inspiration for tonight's episode in the discussion? I know there was some EW involved, but more than just that.
Yeah. So I've been reading with interest Rocky's views of different game systems for air war. I've always loved air war games for a very, very long time. I'm actually hopefully will be contributing a little bit of content to an upcoming title if all goes well, a game title that I won't mention because it hasn't been finalized. And I've also been doing a little playing around with some stuff for some miniatures games, and I just think it's a great topic. You did an article, Rocky, on the game that's got the circular counters, and I was fascinated by that. And when I saw that, I thought, we got to talk. And that's awesome, yeah. And I thought, this is a topic that it's an interesting era, or it's an interesting genre of war games because there's so much stuff going on here. So, I'm going to start off just by saying, the first air war game I played, and I don't know if it qualifies as an air war game, was Chopper Strike by Milton Bradley.
Awesome. Yes. I never had that one, but I saw it and always, I need that. But no, I never had that one. Oh, you're a lucky dog.
Yeah.
And it is a war game that takes place in the air. It seems like an aerial war game to me.
It does indeed. And it was more chess-like than anything else. But since that time, when I think back on this stuff, I think I was looking back over it, I think the American Heritage Games, the Dogfight game, was maybe one of the first one I'd ever seen, the World War I game that I think is just sort of like checkers. But the first air war game that I ever played, like complex, what I would consider a war game, was Avalon Hill's Flight Leader. And at the time that I was playing it, I know that now at the time, Richthofen's War had already come out, and I believe Luftwaffe had already been out. But we played Flight Leader, and it was the first time I really got crunchy with a war game. And I was going to pass it over. Rocky, how about you? What was your first one?
My first one, I was a Dauntless from Battle Line. So the late 70s, Dauntless and Air Force, the Battle Line versions before Avalon Hill picked up on it. But that was followed not too long after that. Yeah, Flight Leader came out. So in terms of like modern games, the different air games, World War II, the Dauntless and Air Force, World War I, Richthofen's War, and then somewhere in there, Quinto came out with their game Wings, which was World War I. You had Flight Leader in there. You had the early, can't remember exactly when the early J.D. Webster games started, but Foxbat, and was it Foxbat and Phantom?
Foxbat and Phantom, yes.
Yeah, that was in there. Air War, I think it was Air War. I had a couple of those SPI, Dunnigan and others, SPI air games in there that were just different. So
I would be very curious to know what the production numbers were on the original SPI era Air War versus the TSR SPI era Air War, because I know a crap ton of people that had the TSR version in the standard size box with the full color cover and everything, and it's a damn good looking game. I've seen the flat pack in the wild maybe twice in my life, but I know a lot of people that had the TSR boxed edition of Air War. I also don't know a single person that ever played an entire scenario of that game to completion.
One.
Okay, so I know one. Because I mean, seriously, like I know we sat down and tried it multiple times.
Yes.
Look, I get it. I'm a ground combat dude, and so the aviation stuff is not my shtick, and that's fine. But I've given it the good old college try multiple times with friends growing up over the years where we wanted to figure this out. Damn it, we want to do this dogfighting thing.
Yeah.
And we'd sit down and we'd parse through everything you needed to do, and we'd go like 3 hexes on the map, and it would take us 20 minutes, and we'd go, okay, now what? And then we'd do it all again, and after like an hour and a half, we were finally in position where we could shoot each other, and then that took another 40 minutes to figure out. And like, you know, by the time you were done with a 3-hour game, you'd played like 27 seconds of real time. And we're like, we're done. We're done. We're going to go do something else.
I think Byron had that on his list to talk about tonight, a little bit further on down.
Yeah, I did.
Going back to your question there, Byron, there's that, and listening to both of you, there's many different types of air games out there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just not, Byron had a list here, and I'll let him go through it of the different types and just comments about each. But, you know, it's a big sky, little planes, but there's a lot of sky up there that you can play in. So, Byron?
Yeah, you know, that's actually maybe a great segue into talking about, you know, because we've really touched on two things. One is sort of what I would call the evolution of war games. I remember playing Richthofen's War, and not too long after it came out, and it was a very simple kind of game, and I remember being able to work my way through it with our friends. It really just seemed to me to be a bit of what I will call a turning battle game. And then not long after that, we had Luftwaffe, which was really an air campaign game. And then at the same time, not too long after that, there was also B-17 Queen of the Skies, which is sort of a narrative game. So I take a look at the air war games, and I really think, well, the kinds of games there are. Well, there's obviously plane-to-plane combat, and that seems to consume a little bit of, you know, quite a bit of the market space. Then there's the operational campaign games like Luftwaffe, but more recently we've seen the stuff by Lieber and Kamuad, like is it Downtown?
Downtown.
And one about the Sinai, you know, the Arab-Israeli War, Elusive Victory.
Yeah, and then there's the Wing Leader,
Red Storm
family of stuff.
Right.
Did Lee do Red Storm?
Red Storm is the Doug Bush's GMT version of the raid system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it wasn't Lee Birmingham Wood that did the design work on that one, though, right?
Right.
No, he took Lee's system and built off of it.
Yeah.
All right.
And then along with those air war games, there was also the sort of an interesting take on that, which is the enemy coast ahead, the Doolittle raid and the Dam Buster raid, which is, again, it's for the concept of air war. It really gets, there is a richness of topics here. And of course, the final thing I mentioned is the narrative games like B-17 Queen of the Skies. And that's been reiterated now to different flavors. There's a B-29 game. There's an A4 Skyhawk Vietnam game. I think it's either Legion or Compass is coming out one on the lead sled, the Thunder Chief. And those games are air war games, but they're sort of that individual game. And DVG with their leader games, which is what is the leader game? They're not plane to plane, but they're also not grand strategic? They're almost like a mission planning game, are they not?
They are. In some ways, they're almost an RPG. That you have you're focused so much on the pilots in those cases that you get almost like an RPG narrative element thrown into it also. Okay. But I mean, you make a great point there. Is like, I mean, just the types of games and how it's gone over time. I think, I mean, early on, there was a couple of the branches. You're right. The first early ones were very much plane to plane. And I think some of those were, I mean, they were the attempts to make, take what people understood of war game design at the time and make it the famous, Richthofen's War, the way the movement there worked, the I go, you go, and, you turn, shoot, run away, and then the other guy would turn, shoot, run away. Certainly the counters looked air war-like, but it wasn't really. Then it evolved over time, but it evolved in terms of just the game design of plane-to-plane combat. but it also involved in terms of just what it was depicting. You mentioned Luftwaffe, and the one I had was Bomber by Yaquinto. That was, when I first got that one, that was just like, I mean, I sat down expecting, okay, here I'm going to be doing, again, fighters versus bombers, but all of a sudden I'm doing entire missions, doing a whole day of a campaign or a week of a campaign, air campaign. And now that you mentioned in there, the one that popped up in there at the time, that was yet another take on it, famously Air War, was RAF, the solo game. And that whole piece of, all of a sudden I have my planes, and so a Spitfire is different from an ME-109, but I'm not fighting them in the air. I'm not like turning and burning, but now I'm like doing the whole mission planning and target analysis and target assignments. There's so much you can do with an air game, and no matter if you want to be really super crunchy and maybe sometimes too crunchy, or up to something that's very, I mean, those narrative games are not crunch at all, but still a lot of engaging and building a story.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, please.
Well, so what I wanted to add, and this is going to get us probably a little off the list of questions and comments that you had to kind of guide some of this, but I am curious because you guys, just in mentioning it. So first of all, aerial combat at this point is little more than 100 years old. So we've only got so far back we can go to mine aerial combat compared to ground and naval combat, just because it hasn't existed for as long in history as those others have. But in just talking about some of the games that folks have played over the years and some of the different ones that you guys have had, Ricky's War is one where a lot of folks started. It's one that Mark covered in a TBT article for us. It's one of the fairly simple, flying a biplane around shooting people. And there's not a whole lot to it in terms of things you have to manage as a part of it. Flip side of that, we talked about, I mentioned Air War, that, it takes you 3 hours to play 27 seconds of real time. As we scroll forward through history, technological advances in air combat seem to come a lot faster and a little more furious than technological advances in ground combat, for sure. Probably some naval, although they seem to be accelerating over the last 30 to 50 years compared to where everything started. But as you look through the historical scope of those aerial games, and Rocky, I'll throw it to you first and let Byron run with it from there. Where do you see key technological changes that are ones that really you kind of have to capture in the game if the game is truly going to capture the spirit of air combat in that era? Where are those breakpoints, and what are the big changes that you see going from one to the other? You don't have to do the whole span of aerial history or anything, but pick one or two, and what do you think?
I'm going to attack your question or answer your question in a slightly different way. It's not necessarily, was it World War II where it broke, or was it the Korea, Vietnam? When it comes to aerial war games, to me, where the design really changed is one of the games that Byron already mentioned. That's Mo Morgan's Flight Leader. Going into before Flight Leader, game design when it was look at aerial combat was very much of a two-dimensional pulsed movement. Are we going to use impulsive movement? Are we going to use plotted movement? There was a little bit of a 3D design piece to it. There was a little bit of my engine's more powerful than yours, but the first one that really looked at air warfare more as a more modern take on air warfare was Mo Morgan, to me. Mo Morgan's Flight Leader, because he's the first one that was starting to understand and really grok the OODA loop and John Boyd and the impact that he was having with the changes in air warfare, the whole idea of energy management. And that Mo Morgan wrote an article in the General Magazine that to me was an absolute eye-opener about a Flight Leader, because he started talking about energy management. Everything before that, it was all just, okay, I'm higher, I'm faster, my plane turns a little bit better than yours, but nobody really communicated or understood it. But Mo, with that one, first one explained, like, hey, you really is energy, altitude's energy, speed's energy. Your plane burns off or bleeds off energy differently. And to me, that was the first one. Byron, you mentioned that one is one of your first ones. What is your thought?
Yeah, it's interesting. We sort of have this parallel experience because I remember playing Richtofen's War, and it was certainly a lot of fun. And also, I'll give a shout out to podcasts that just went Dawn Patrol, which was really, it looked like TSR had bought a set of flight air combat rules and said, yeah, but we're a role-playing game, so we better add a role-playing game component to it. But I was really knew mostly about about air combat through World War One, through the kind of stuff that we see through Rick Thompson's War. And it was always, everyone has 100% awareness of where you are. You can always kind of see what's going on. And it is literally just a dance of counters, like figuring out where the other person's going to be in a very fast escape. I'll tell you a story about one of the first times we played Flight. Maybe it was the second or third game. We introduced the idea of the spotting rule, and we had two flights. I think we were doing something in the Korean War. We had like two flights that had an intersecting pathway, and one team, I think it was the Koreans/Chinese, continued to fail their spotting rule, and the Americans pulled up behind them, spotted them, and just obliterated them, just shot them to pieces because the other guys had failed their spotting rolls. And I remember at the time, that was a real downer on the experience. I think we didn't play Flight Leader too many times after that. But I also thought, well, this is what air combat actually is. This is the nature of air combat is sneaking and I even read a biography, a guy, a World War I pilot, who said, the idea of there being knights in the air, to mention another Avalon Hill title, was completely false. The idea was sneak up behind someone, knife them in the back. That was air war. That was what they were trying to achieve. And I remember playing Flight Leader and having this game where someone didn't see like the other side. And I think it was highly realistic because there's certainly, Dick Bong, leading air race of American air race, the U.S. Navy, World War II, achieved, 85% of his kills doing zoom and booms, where you can almost guarantee that most of the guys he shot down didn't see him coming. But what is that? But you can't game that. You can't have a game where one player says, well, you're flying along and all of a sudden your left wing falls off. Because, 75% of the time your left wing falls off. That isn't much of a game. So Flight Leader, I agree with what you say. Flight Leader was the game that really introduced not only the idea of speed and energy, but also the idea of observe the sky's. You said at the beginning, the sky's a very big place. Trying to find someone to shoot down is a hard run thing. And I think, and I continue to this day when I sort of play air war games, I sort of continue to think about, the balance between having a good game that's a lot of fun to play, where everyone knows where everyone else is and you can see them and you never lose sight of them in the clouds, and no one ever dives down through a cloud bank and you never see them again, versus having a good time playing a game. So and I think Flight Leader did that. And then the J.D. Webster series games, which was Air Superiority and Airstrike, and what was the other one? Gulf Strike? Desert Strike?
Air Superiority, Air Superiority, Airstrike. Yeah, it was Desert Eagles was like one of the Eagles expansion.
Desert Strike.
And then he branched into his World War II. Well, okay. Was it Speed of Heat was the Clash of Arms version?
Yeah.
But then he also went into the World War II Fighting Wings series.
Recently.
And everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that I do think that in the early 80s, there was, if you will, a shift of what was going on with air war games. But we also at that time saw started games like, air operation games like Bomber and things like that. When I think about air war games, sometimes I think there really are a few different, like all other games. And I think air war games sometimes I'm a little bit biased. I think they get a short shrift. I think there's a lot more richness, a lot more depth and richness in that genre, because there is down and dirty knife fighting, there's operational stuff, there's campaign stuff, and I don't know how it translates to a larger. Air war games don't seem to get played a lot at a lot of the conventions I go to. I guess is where I'm trying to go with this. There's usually one or two guys that are hardcore World War I guys, hardcore World War II. That's it. So.
I think air war games are challenging on a tabletop because it's tough to do 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So that is one hassle. It is tough to replicate the speed at which you are expected to make decisions under semi-realistic conditions. Rocky, that goes back to you talking about the OODA loop, which at some point we probably ought to explain for anybody in the audience that doesn't know what it is. But for now, I think the 3D nature of things, the very small, items in a very big space, because again, as Rocky has noted, the sky is big, becomes a challenge. Going back to Byron, what you were saying with the spotting rules, and you you got to find the thing you're trying to shoot, which can be challenging in a space that big. And again, the speed at which things happen, I think all of those things conspire to make dogfighting level aerial combat challenging on a tabletop. I think the minis guys have cracked that a little bit better because the 3D nature of miniatures wargaming gives you a better visual sense of what's happening there. Even if they're just on very basic stands, you have the ability to provide at least a little better sense of facing and height disparity. Never mind something like Aerodrome, right? When you've got the guys on the giant extendable pointers. The first time I saw it, I was like, what the hell? But my first thought was, what the hell? My second thought was, that's genius. It's something that's tough to model when you're using a two-dimensional tool to model 3 dimensions. And then again, the speed at which things happen, the more ponderous, thoughtful nature of tabletop gaming can make that more difficult at the dogfighting level. And that's something that I think we'll probably get to at some point in tonight's conversation. Is at some point you're aggregating individual planes into groups of planes and then into aerial campaigns. And at that point, tabletop game may work just perfectly fine, because when you're sending out flights of, 68 bombers with 74 fighter escorts represented by, 1, 2, 3 counters on the map. Yeah, I mean, the height difference isn't all that big a deal at that point. You can work with it. But I think at the dogfighting level, even, you're going to see it at a convention because you got the space to put stuff out and you've got the dedicated block of time to futz with it. But I just think they're hard to do on a tabletop. Rocky, what do you think, man?
I got to agree with you. I mean, if you want to sit down at the granular level for dogfighting, I mean, the early games, Dauntless, Richthofen's War, very simple counters, a blue map. You're trying to imagine the third dimension. Games that came along that started giving you the mini folks, because you could get at least a 3D plane at first, and then you were able to put it on a stand and get up there. It lets you see and sense that in a much better fashion. I mean, and look, then at the other side, I think there's a reason like Wings of Glory is a popular game system, because it's World War I biplanes, which are easy to fly, not that complicated, but it just looks so damn visual with all the circus of airplanes out there. I think the complexity of air warfare is partially what drove the change in scales. Mo Morgan with Fight Leader, he is emphasizes in the article, people were criticizing him because they're like, your turns are 30 seconds or 15 seconds long, and you were like, you can't, that's too long, because you need like 2.5 seconds in like some of the Dauntless and Air War and some of that stuff, and it's like, no, 30 seconds is how you make the decisions. That's that OODA loop. You have to observe, you orient, you decide what you're going to do, you act. That doesn't happen in 2.5 seconds. He was extending it out to the doctrine, or the whole approach to air warfare changed. But that also then drove the change to like operational level games. I think people started backing out, saying, I don't want to sit here. And I think we all forget at the same time too, computer games were starting to show up in the 80s and into the 90s. So all of a sudden the modeling and sim, and I can sit there and do a computer game.
Season 16 of Mentioned in Dispatches is underway, and we couldn't do it without our Patreon supporters, and especially the regimental captains at the top level. The Armchair Dragoons would like to thank Chris Anthony, James M., Brian Silcott, Chet Bell, Joseph Knoll, Paul LaFontaine, Miles R., Staggerwing, Fred's Dog, and Fred 2, Kevin Bertram, Michael Sunborg, Patrick Garrity, Catastrophe Games, Hethwell War Games, and Greg from Pico Armor. They help us to keep our objectives in our line of sight. You too can support the Regiment of Strategy Gaming as a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/armchairdragoons.
Byron?
I was actually going to tag on to one of Brant's comments, and I was going to say, so given the complexity of the dogfight environment, at what point do we just give up on verisimilitude and just have a good playing experience? Because World War I games, certainly like Wings of Glory, and I've had a lot of those, played a lot of those games. The great thing about that is it was a little bit slow. you could really figure out where the other guy is. But once you move to the jet age, I mean, even I was looking at my copy of Flight Leader the other day, and if you model modern weapons, so each hex on that Flight Leader map is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, which means the best BVR radar-guided missiles that the U.S. Air Force has actually allow you to shoot from someone that's not even entered the board yet. So there comes a point where I think that, Brent, you asked the question about technology. When does technology change? I think you can play World War I and World War II in a format where, even though it's complex, it makes sense. I think when you hit modern air war, jets, missiles, things start getting, the abstractions are, and especially for someone like me who doesn't have any, flight experience, or, never been on a passenger jet, you really begin to realize just how big that environment is and how incredibly complex modern air war is. So I agree with what you said. Like, there comes a point where the complexity of the air war environment just got maybe too complex. And Rocky, your article on different jet age or Cold War level rules, I think, kind of highlighted some of that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Is like, as the speed went up, your weapons ranges started going on. Getting at that you have to zoom out so you have a view. If you're so far narrowed down, as much as I love J.D. Webster's games, 2.5 seconds is just you just can't. You like, to Brant's point, you spend an hour of play and you figure out you've done 30 seconds of combat. What have you really experienced there?
Right.
Certainly, you're a great fighter pilot. You turn and burn. You went inverted, gave him the birdie, all that sort of stuff. But what did you really do? So I think in the more modern games, that's where you see, like, what Lee Broom-Comwood did is he backed out and started doing that more raid. You still get the differentiation of, okay, this is the fighters, these are the bombers, these are the escorts, but you backed out that picture and you got that more of that whole event that was going on, not just that one in the cockpit sort of view. To me, and those work best. I've seen some people, we had Luftwaffe, we had Bomber, but we had some other people try some World War II games. But I think the raid system actually works really well in the modern age, because it is that balance between the complexity of the air warfare, the distances, the number of aircraft involved, and the like. That makes that system shine in the modern age.
I think it's probably a combination of the speed at which jet engines move. Byron, back to your point, like, you can get up through World War II reasonably well, but after that, it kind of starts to fall apart some. Yes, I get there were some jets present in World War II. Got it. But I think the point at which the entire sky is full of jets is one of your issues. Rocky, going back to your point, the speed at which things happen get to be very challenging at an individual aircraft scale on the map. But the other thing that I think really changes after World War II, and the jets are a bit of a part of this, but the point at which you've got the ability to engage beyond line of sight, I think, really changes things as well.
Yeah.
Because now your spotting of the enemy is not a visual task, it's a radar task. Which means not only do you now have the radar component into the game, but you've also got the electronic countermeasures component in all of this that is now layering on additional complexity to the game. Yeah. But I think the point at which, you're trying to figure out, where's the other guy? What am I targeting with? What do I have to shoot him with? Do I have him acquired with the radar? Can I maintain lock through EW? And I'm doing it while flying at jet speeds. I think at that point it becomes a little too much for a board game to handle. The board game really starts to creak under the weight of all of those things piling on top of each other. Like, if it was just one of those ships, like World War II, we can add the jet, we can add the ME-262s, because we're not dealing with non-line of sight weapons. We're not dealing with target acquisition, individual aircraft target acquisition with radar. We're not dealing with as much of, the EW with the level of complexity that we start to see later. Never mind all the other countermeasures that you get. I think, it just gets to be too much for the board game. And that's where you start aggregating up. And, it gets to one of the other questions I was going to ask you guys, which is, at what point how high up do you have to go for the aggregations to really make sense? Is it enough to just go up from one aircraft to 4, and now you have a flight of aircraft zipping around, because I think that's what the individual counters are in downtown. Aren't they flights of like 4 to 6 aircraft?
Yeah,
2 to 4.
Yeah, 2 to 4. And I think the minis game Blood Red Skies also deals with what I will call a flight of planes.
Yeah. But then, you go up from 4 to 16 or 20.
Right.
Rocky, you know what those echelons are way better than I'm ever gonna. So, I mean, how high do you have to go in the aggregations before the game clicks into place that it makes sense as a game? So,
I think that it depends what you want out of the game.
Yeah.
If you are sitting there and you want to be Maverick and you want to turn and burn, maybe 2, single aircraft for sure, maybe a pair, maybe a flight of 4. When you start going higher than that, you're sort of not in the cockpit anymore.
No.
You're taking that overview piece. And at that point, then it comes down to what are you trying to do? I mean, something like downtown with multiple flights of aircraft. Okay, you're that mission commander, leading, organizing, doing that whole raid. But you could even step it up a level. One of the more recent ones, NATO Air Commander. You are basically the Air Forces Europe or the Soviet front, theater commander with all those, individual aircraft in that one are basically squadrons.
Yeah,
so Hollenspiels games, yeah. NATO Air Commander. What at that point you're still very much involved, but you're at a whole different level, and then those are squadrons of aircraft.
Yeah.
But do you still get what experience do you want out of it? Do you want to be the whole air war commander? Okay, that's great. You can do that.
Well, I think, in asking what experience you want out of it, I think you've got to match the tool to the experience you're after. And that Top Gun Maverick, turn and burn thing that you're describing there, at that point, go grab a joystick, right? I mean, at that point, go plug in. Because the tools are better for the task you're trying to create. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm casting shade on the electronic side of things at all. Like, we cover plenty of digital games here, and for what they are after, I think those may be a better tool because they can provide to the player the decision making at speed. That gives you that experience that you're never going to get on a board game. And so I think it's just a case of not every tool is a hammer, unless you're a tank mechanic, in which case, yes, every tool is in fact a hammer. Go plug in and don't apologize for it. Like, that's the best way to get the experience you're after, isn't it?
Yeah.
It certainly can be. I think Byron mentioned the other games, the narrative games. I think people who want to you want that turn and burn, but don't want to just be the technical, hey, I have to be, lightning fast reflexes in the joystick, start focusing more on the story of air combat. And that's where you get those narrative games, that B-17, Queen of the Skies. Hey, I have my airplane, I have my crew, I have a mission. I got to get through 25 missions. Can I make it through? Can I be the Memphis Belle and make it through this entire campaign? And there's so many different variations of that one. Oh, was it the Luftwaffe? Skies? Was it
Skies Above the Reich? Yeah,
Skies Above the. There's all these narrative pieces then that I think people are like, okay, I still want to have that feeling that I'm a pilot. I'm still part of that crew, part of that squadron.
Yeah.
But it goes about it differently by focusing more on the narrative side of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
To give you that experience, because if you want to go, just play with the joysticks, go pick up a computer. But if you want to, tell the story, I love the Skies Over the Reich and those ones because you end up with you start getting very personally involved. Like, hey, I got this pilot and he's hot, he's doing great, and then all of a sudden that one mission is just like everything, all the dice go wrong, and your number one guy's down, and all of a sudden you're sitting going like, well, how am I going to fill that hole? And that's a whole different experience, and still a very valid one too.
I think one of the most compelling, I guess for me, one of the most compelling things about the air combat game is that, and it's backed up by the literature when you read historical accounts of the stuff, is that there are these great stories of guys getting into the intensity of combat, of following through a mission. But then there's also these the golden baby moments of air combat, like where you've got a bomber mission and it's a single hit or a single hit to the engine, and everything goes south, and those
pear-shaped, as the Brits like to say.
Yes, yeah. And I don't know how many other games really, I mean, do you really have that golden baby moment in a Battle of Gettysburg or something like that? So it really, the air war, the personal combat air war game, whether it's a dogfight or whether it's a narrative story, really provides these very tense moments of gaming, and that are all, there's certainly lots of historical records of guys who, take a single round to an engine and don't make it back. But at the same time, there's also this incredibly complex story of what you could do. Certainly, and I would say certainly in the modern era. I mentioned in sort of the pre-show notes, I'm reading a couple books right now about the air war in Vietnam, and I kind of thought I was well read about the air war, about like air war in general. And I was astounded by the importance that things like electronic warfare and countermeasures and AWACS plays. There's in the modern era theater. There's stories about the North Vietnamese scramble a couple of MiG-21s, and the planes are so bombarded by ECM that they're basically blind and deaf. And the Americans, vector a couple Crusaders on it. It's a one-sided story. I don't think anyone knew what was happening. It's an incredibly complex story, but I don't know how much that would translate into a two-player war game. Single-player war game, yeah. Single player, like a solo game where you're doing something like a B-17 Queen of the Skies, like the A4 Skyhawk single player game. Maybe that would work, but boy, if I was playing a game and someone just said, yeah, no, you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, just keep on flying towards hex E3. And then all of a sudden, I'm rolling to see if I survive the ejection. I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah, you've been hit. Mind you, maybe that's a criticism or an observation we can make, or whether it's an criticism observation we can make of all forms of combat in its ugly reality. Not seeing where it's coming from.
You made me think there, Byron, because one of your notes was talking about, is it the man or is it the machine that makes air warfare? And I think going back and looking, I mean, the original sort of the original thoughts or approaches to air warfare, the Knights in the Air, Rick Dovin's war sort of captured that whole gallant knights in the air, wings, gallant knights in the air, because you had your flying circuses and the like. Those early games were an okay balance between the pilot and the aircraft. But as you come up to today, I think a lot of people look at just like what you just talked about. There's so much technical behind it that is the man even in there? Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, the answer really is yes. And finding the games that help you show that. And again, I come back to those narrative games, because even the Leader series, you can have Phantom Leader and Skyhawk Leader, whatever, all those other ones. Sure, it's modern tech, and you're going in and doing the strikes and everything, all the high tech weaponry. I got PGMs, precision guided munitions, and all this sort of stuff. But it comes back to, and I think that's the appeal, is it comes back down to not your kit. Mm-hmm. It comes down to that crew member that you have in there, and that narrative piece captures that. And I think in some ways air warfare games are, sort of struggle with sometimes with, am I going to be more technically overloaded, or am I going to go human overloaded? But I think if you want to be technical overloaded, you go play a computer game. If you want to focus on the human side of it, you're going to pick up a tabletop war game. Yeah.
That's a great point, because there's a group of guys that I sometimes game with, do miniatures gaming and miniatures World War I. And one of the game sets they use is called Canvas Eagles, which, Canvas Eagles is really about airplane performance and airplane dynamics. One plane has better sort of churning characteristics than another. And just like Battletech, like the wings have little check marks. So once you get too many tick marks on your left wing, it comes off or it fails. Another group of guys, so they also are playing something called Check Your Six. And Check Your Six by Skirmish Campaigns, they really do emphasize pilot skill. So the more advanced players, like the less advanced players, I think they move first, and the more advanced players move later. And you plot your turn. But it really is a shift between, is it the plane? Am I the pilot? Me, Jack Nasty Face, flying the plane in this game, or is it the character, the virtual character that is given to me by the game that's flying this? Like, I'm certainly not an ace pilot, but I can play an ace pilot in the game, and I will reap all the benefits of that. So I think we're seeing. It's interesting to see how designers are trying to balance that and how they're trying to accommodate that in their game choices. The one that I've seen most recently on that is Check Your Six. So yeah, the man or the machine. I never really thought about that for a very long period of time until I started seeing some recent titles.
So, Rocky, which is it, the man or the machine?
I think it's the man, and I'll point to a war game example. Go look. J.D. Webster many times will do play-by-post emails of his Fighting Wings series games, right. and J.D. Webster is virtually unbeatable. Doesn't matter. You can give him the shiniest little airplane. You can take the biggest, shiniest one you can imagine, and he will complete your clock consistently because one, he knows his game system really well, but two, he knows how to fly his planes with that game system. So you can give him a lousy piece of kit, but he knows how to wring every single ounce out of it. So it's an imperfect example, but that's the man over the machine.
It is, yeah. So in that case, I guess it's to modify that Chuck Yeager phrase. Is it the player or the man, or the player, the pilot, or the machine? Because in J.D. Webster's case, it's certainly the player that has the advantages.
Is it the player or the game system?
Yeah.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, segueing on to something else, as a guy that's played a lot of Air War games, Rocky, I'd like to ask you, what are some things that you think maybe haven't been emphasized enough, or what are some of the things? What are the things what are we talking about? What are we not talking about that we should be talking about in the Air War game or in Air War games? Are there things that get overlooked? My example on this is the importance of moving mud, and recent geopolitical events are indicating the importance of this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of games, dogfighting is a lot of fun, but let's not kid ourselves. The whole purpose of Air War was to put bombs on target, for lack of a better word.
I gotta agree, and I think it's the GMT games World War I. Is it Bloody April?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the whole that whole campaign. I mean, you have your airplanes, and you certainly have, but the real emphasis on that game is get up, get your aircraft to do the artillery spotting every day.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, the measure of success is not necessarily. I've never seen it. Not never. I rarely see it expressed in such stark terms. You're the whole reason for the day. The reason for your flight missions is I need to get up to get that artillery spotted. So I'm going to have put my artillery spotter planes up. I'm going to put barrage balloons up. I'm going to have my anti-aircraft to try to funnel things. I'm going to send up my fighter sweeps to try to sweep the skies against it. But at the end of the day, the real measure of success is, did I get my artillery spotting missions in?
Yeah.
And that was just such a great reminder of all of a sudden, it's like, you were sitting out there and you got your scarves in the wind.
Yeah.
And you're hunting, you're a hunter going out there. But at the end of the day, you may have shot down 5 or 6 other fighters, but the guy still got all his artillery spotting missions in, and your frontline troops got hammered, and you are not doing so well in the game.
You look good doing it, though.
You look good.
Well,
yeah.
You know what they say? Fighter pilots make movies, bomber pilots make history, right?
Mm-hmm. I think the other good one is, like, again, I mentioned before, the NATO Air Commander. I mean, your measure of success is you're doing all those missions, but where's the front moving? Where are each of those fronts? Are they advancing? Are you holding them off? Are the Red Hordes coming through the folded gap? Have you done your part to push them back? So, I think you're right. The ones that really make the best sense or give you that really, why am I here, are the ones that give you that other view. And a lot of it is, hey, there's a mission. Something's going on. It's not just... I'm not just going up there and just turning and burning.
There is an objective to that air power. It is there. It is in the skies for a reason. Again, I'm reading. I'm a voracious reader on air power. I'm reading about the Korean War as well, and the amount of missions that are being run by the U.S. Navy, by the Air Force, are all in support of the ground troops. Like once the front kind of stabilizes, in Korea, it's all close air support. It's all close air support, and there's MiG alleys going on, but most of the missions that are certainly coming through. The U.S. Navy has literally thousands of sorties during the war. I'm going through a list of. I was reading through some of the ship after action ship report logs for, Valley Forge and some of them, and they're tracking like piles of lumber and oxen that they blew up and ox carts and railroad junctions and you name it. And it's all, meanwhile, the number of Panther pilots that shot down airplanes is not that significant. So most of the sorties are interdiction or close air support. Vietnam, I don't know if it changes that much. I think most of Vietnam is blowing up ground targets.
I love that back in World War II they were using B-25s to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of great pieces of where the B-25s, those medium bombers, light bombers, went off and did something that maybe wasn't totally expected, but yeah. The other missions, the other reasons for the air war games.
Yeah. What about shooting back? Brant, you mentioned that all you thought about was when you talk about air war games and shooting back. What about SAM and AA and AAA? Is that do we like introducing that stuff, or where does that play a role? Some of the games that I played include a component on there. Even games like Wings of Glory had ground bunkers or whatever, machine gun troops. But there are a lot of other games that didn't even bother including rules for AAA.
I think part of that may go back to what Rocky was talking about earlier is, sort of what's the experience that you're after, because if the game involves a heavy dose of close air support, there's no way you can do that without modeling return fire coming from the ground.
Got it. Yeah.
It's close air support, right? That's kind of the point. So I don't see how you do it without including that on some level. How you do that, does that need to be as granular as you're tracking all of the anti-aircraft batteries or individual, anti-aircraft guns? Maybe, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing an individual aircraft, doing close air support in an individual battle, maybe you do. I don't know. But I think if you're doing something that's slightly, an echelon or so above where you're managing 4 or 8 or 16 aircraft at once, then maybe it's enough to aggregate the anti-aircraft batteries. Part of that depends on the scale of your map, right? What are you flying over? Is it a 10-kilometer hex? Is it a 2-kilometer hex? Is it a 50-kilometer hex? 50-kilometer hex can contain multiple anti-aircraft batteries. And some practical real-world experience in my case, I'd say practical. Okay, it was laser tag. Got it. But the first gig that I did on active duty when I got to my unit out in California, we were the OP4 for the initial operational deployment tests for the Apache Longbow system. And so they're running the Apaches out there where they're having us line up to replicate the types of columns that the Longbows and the Apaches were expected to attack. Mostly deep strike missions, but not exclusively. And so we're driving around in tanks that have been, we've got all the laser tag gear on there. The model that has been programmed into our tanks is not the M1, even though we're driving M1s around. They've been programmed to act like T-80s or T-90s or T-72s or whatever else out there, the Chinese type 80s or whatever they might have been. Because you can do all that on the back end, right? You can have the computer do all of that.
Yeah.
That we're driving around in the tanks, but we've also got a whole lot of individual aircraft, anti-aircraft assets with us. So we've got interspersed in our column all sorts of contractors driving around actual Soviet vehicles that have all the anti-aircraft stuff on them. We probably had a brigade's worth of anti-aircraft stuff with our one tank company that's cruising around out there just because they wanted to make it as hard as possible for the Longbows to do their thing. But, when you send an OP4 unit out there as a part of an anti-aircraft test, the tanks are looking at the sky, looking for something to shoot. Is that what's going to happen in a game where you're close air support for somebody on the ground? No, the tanks are looking for other tanks to go shoot. Like, they're not looking through the sky for something to shoot back at. That's why I brought all the air defense guys along with me.
Yeah.
So, let the duck hunters hunt ducks. I got ground targets I got to chase around. And that actually happened late in the test. They brought the Divisional Cav Squadron from Fort Carson, from 4th Infantry, to out to us in California to be the ground op for. And it's not like they just threw that in at the end of the test. That was planned all along.
Mm-hmm.
Ready, come join us. And so that gave us a more robust test, because now you don't just have us driving around looking for aircraft to shoot. Now we've got ground forces we got to worry about also. Yeah. You know, again, what's the scale you're operating at?
Yeah.
What are you aggregating
to? When do we start seeing this move towards that kind of stuff? I mean, it's certainly Cold War. Gaming wise, I remember the first game that captured that. It was TAC Air by Avalon Hill.
So TAC Air was sort of a take on the air. It was one of the early ones that started looking at, early. It was one of the ones that started to look at air-land battle.
Yeah.
And trying to show that. I mean, I consider that one sort of a predecessor to Lee Broomcom Wood's Raid series.
Yeah.
And you have a area in Europe, you know, one of the cores, and you know, this is sort of what's going on.
Yeah.
The air ground interface there. Yeah. You had a very poor ground combat element, but the focus was on the air part of the air land battle.
Yeah. And in IRL, as the kids say, in real life, when do we really see, is the first time we see that Gulf War I with the A-10s?
In terms of the actual execution of it?
Yeah. Like, when do we really see that kind of or is there something maybe in the Middle East that I'm forgetting?
In terms of airland battle doctrine, I think it's Gulf War. In terms of that forward close air support, 73, the Israelis had it. It took them a little bit of time to figure it out because they still had too many tanks without infantry support up front.
Yeah, Elusive Victory shows that. But
once they figured it out, it was pretty impressive. A lot of that goes down to, going back to Rocky, you know, is it the pilot, is it the machine? Israeli Air Force pilots are pretty damn good.
They were indeed, yeah.
I mean, you go back to you know, Lee Broomcom Woods downtown, so the Vietnam War,
right,
and all the SA-2s, the guideline missiles. If you play downtown, you see the whole ground electronic warfare piece is very well done in there. I think a lot of people sometimes choke on downtown because a big part of the raid is you're not worried about getting past the MiGs. You're worried about all those freaking anti-aircraft guns and those missiles that are going to be coming up at you. But it's not just the missiles. It's like, where's the radars that are guiding those missiles? Not the fire control radars, but where are the air search radars? And you just keep backing out, and all of a sudden you start realizing, hey, I need to bring along electronic warfare jammers. Yeah. I need that air controller to give me the warnings of what's going on there and everything. Yeah. So, I mean, where does that start? I mean, I think something like Downtown showed that really well. TAC Air had elements of that. I think TAC Air sort of suffered a little bit by being almost too much of a training game. Yeah. More than a war game. But
I think TAC Air had enough detail on the ground that if all you wanted to do was just fight the ground combat stuff, you could do that. Just ignore the aviation component. I mean, it defeats the purpose of the game, but
you could. Yeah. It was a little bit ugly, but yeah.
I think it was a lot more fun for whoever was flying the planes.
I mean, that was the point. Rocky, you might know this. If anybody of the three of us, you're the one most likely to know this off the top of your head. But of most people I know, you're probably the one most likely to know this off the top of your head or close. What was the rough split in Vietnam of aircraft shot down by other aircraft versus aircraft shot down by ground fire?
Byron, you've been reading on this. What's your research telling you?
Yeah, it's overwhelmingly it's ground fire. Overwhelmingly. Now, having said that, the North Vietnamese, the Air Force do have quite a few kills. They amount more air-to-air kills than the Americans do. But partially, that's because the U.S. forces are flying so many sorties that, I mean, it really is a matter of, you've got to hit something. And they're also, the North Vietnamese air combat records also include shooting down the Firebee drones. Like there was a bunch of drones that were used as well. Firebee, and I can't remember the other one, High Bee or something like that. I can't remember the other one that was used. So they actually have quite a few combat losses, or quite a few air victories that are versus drones. But most of the combat losses are A to A or AAA and Sam's, really. I don't know what the percentages are, but I mean, I believe it's well over 80%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Rocky, if you're talking to us, you just lost.
Sorry. Of all the B-52s that were shot down, I mean, almost all of those were done by surface-to-air missiles. I'm not even sure there was an air-to-air kill of a B-52.
No.
And fighters are different, but I mean, to the point, air-to-air or the air-to-ground, surface-to-air was by far the deadliest piece of it.
The biggest challenge, of course. We had a question, or I had a point that I lost it already, but that's okay.
Podcast, we can edit it together. It's fine. I mean, when you think of it. Yeah. We are over the hour mark as we are recording. Again, once we edit down the we'll get it down under the hour. But it's
so with that thought in mind, Byron, favorites.
Yeah, good point. My nostalgic favorite was Flight Leader, because it was one of the first games that I played with a group of guys, and really enjoyed it. I also have a soft spot in my heart, I hate to say for B-17 Queen of the Skies. It was one of the games I played. And again, the group of guys that I used to game with when I was about 15 or 16, they discovered something called Girls, and I didn't. And so I ended up playing a couple solo games, and B-17 kept me busy. So I've always really enjoyed B-17. Recently, the same game system I've been spending a little bit more time with. First off, are some of the DVG titles, just because I like that the idea of mission planning and choosing bomb loads and choosing napalm and figure out what I'm going to do. And also, I'm currently playing the Check Your Six series. I've got some little plastic airplanes I had printed. I had a friend 3D print for me. I'm hoping to do some Vietnam stuff soon. So I think, like a lot of people, I tried but did not enjoy the Air Superiority series, the J.G. Webster series. It didn't make a lot of time on my table. It really didn't. I have the Speed of Heat. I really, really want to love the Speed of Heat. Like I really want to like that game, and I just can't. I can't get into it. So, yeah, Rocky.
I mean, I was looking to say that I put up my BGG collection list. I sorted through to figure out all the different air games I have, and it's like I had so many more than I remembered. These days, my number one air game is the Lee Brimcom Woods Wing Leader series. Okay. I mean, that one's, for people that aren't familiar with it, it's a side scroll game.
Yeah,
it totally sort of flips the script on an air warfare game. You're not looking down. Not that God's eye view. You're looking at it. It's a side scroll.
Yeah,
the ground is at one end of the board or one side of the board. Then you go up to the sky, and it just that different flip. But yet you still move your aircraft across. Mm-hmm. You have dogfighting, but dogfighting really is only two things. Am I going to do a turning fight, or am I going to do a slashing attack? I mean, it abstracts the pieces out, but you really can see an entire mission develop. It does have the sighting rules and tallies, and when you can, how you can move in certain, it doesn't, it certainly is, it doesn't feel like a simulation. It does feel like a game, but yet it still feels very rich in the experience that it delivers. Mm-hmm. And I just love that one. I love it. I love how it flips the script of what an air game, people may think about, but it still delivers such a rich experience. And you do start worried about, okay, this, this flight of fighters is really the good guys, and these are this is my lucky crew, and this is the ones that are the unlucky ones, and hey, I got my fighters that are escorting the bombers, and you're trying to protect the bombers, and the bombers are trying to get through, and you got the AAA on the ground or the ships and everything. It all seems to come together so well for me.
Yeah.
So, Byron, your dog game.
Oh, I'm gonna go with Air War. The
yes,
that's I'm sorry. I just you mentioned earlier the Dauntless game and how that was re-envisioned as Air Force and whatever the titles were. Like there were there was Air Force, and was it Dauntless? It was
I think they did. I forget. I know it was Air Force for sure. I have that one too.
And I remember playing that game, and it was I remember playing it, and it was kind of cool because they had those little charts and performance charts. And I thought, well, I should be able to figure out what's going on in the jet age. And I just simply couldn't. it was too much.
Yeah.
I don't know if along with there's Speed of Heat and also Birds of Prey.
No.
I don't know if I have the ability to do that anymore.
I was going to say Birds of Prey is my dog. I mean, Air War was certainly a dog, just because it took. And we started earlier this podcast by saying Brant said that he knows nobody who finished a game of Air War. I did finish a game of Air War. We did it. It was nowadays the scenario would make no sense, but it was backfire bombers against New York, and you had the F-102 interceptors with the Genie nuclear missiles. Rocky bombers.
You measured your time of play with a calendar, right?
We played all. You were in middle school, high school. We had worked our way through it, and we played. It was an overnight game.
Yeah,
and it took us all the way overnight. But yeah, you got through it eventually, and you're like, wow, okay. But Birds of Prey. I know some people who swear by it. I'm up in the DC area, and there's actually a whole convention every year for Birds of Prey.
Yeah,
God bless them. I've looked at their nonogram. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, hey, look, you don't need a computer to play.
Right.
Here's a couple of some handy charts, and this is the way you sort of graph out, your flight. I see it. It's in terms of a game design, absolutely respect them. But man, that one is so hard to grok. And it didn't help that their early rule books were also crap written.
Right.
They've gotten much better, but I mean, still, it's just give them a choice between a Birds of Prey or something a little bit more narrative. I will go with the narrative any day, because that's where the enjoyment sits for me in a game.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out on one of the favorite games, not because it was spectacular, but just because I had so much fun playing it, which was Wings of Glory, Wings of War. That really, the group of guys, when that first came out, there was a group of guys that I would game with from the local game store, where you could break that out and play a pretty quick dogfight, have a lot of fun. It was easy. Those little cards, putting down those little card templates was a lot of fun. It wasn't difficult. We never played with height rules, just because, half the people didn't know what an airplane, they didn't know. It was just chase the other planes around. It's actually a lot of fun, and that system has really manifested itself in there's a Star Wars game, and what's the Star Trek? Is it Star Wars Armada or Star Trek Armada? So that those little move templates have really changed things. Didn't they do a tank game? Wasn't tanks based on move templates?
Yeah, they've done that sort of model. Which is all to say that, how do you extract the pieces out?
Yeah.
Move it to the cards. Those to help you.
Yeah.
The one game that we haven't mentioned that I think we absolutely must, because as I was looking through my list, you came up and I sort of kicked myself, because I played this one with my kids bajillion of times.
Yeah.
And that is Ace of Aces.
Oh, of course, yes.
The little books. In terms of game design, absolutely phenomenal, incredible game design. You talk about mathing a game design. That's it. But just the pure simple enjoyment. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school and the books, we could sit there. I mean, how many times did we sit there on the school bus, and you just sit there? You pull out your little leather covered Ace of Aces book. Who's going to be the Germans? Who's going to be the Brits? And you just go for it.
I remember playing that game and thinking, how did they think of this? Like, how did they design this game? I was never mystified by what I saw with any other game, because there's hexes or whatever, and you were rolling. But that game, I was like, it was quite amazing. Like I never really understood, like, how did they figure out how to present all that stuff down?
There's articles written about that, and the math behind it, and how he basically mathed it all out.
Yeah,
all the different turns, and then putting it together in the books. But I think part of the reason that one was so popular was it abstracted the air combat.
It did.
But you had those little pictures, and you always wanted to turn to that page where you had the little bull streaks going out and hitting the other guy. It was just there was just so much there to grip you. I mean, it was abstracted enough that the technical side was simple enough to grasp, but yet the narrative of like, oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Where you're sitting, you're turning, you're like, where did he go? Oh, dang it, he's over there. And That was just,
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Yeah. In terms of narrative games, it is one of those that ranks like games that kind of draw your, if you will, your heart into the game, along with the ones like the B-17. It was certainly one of them. There were times that a lot of the other games I played, it was more, if you will, high-speed chess. It was kind of moving pieces around, that one really felt a little bit more, personal, up close and personal. Thanks for mentioning it. It's good.
I know the Ace of Aces and the other similar books like the Lost Worlds books and whatever. I've used those in class on occasion where I was, helping out or appearing as a guest or discussing in some of the game design, game development classes, where one of the things you always talk about, even for the computer games, you always do the paper prototype first, right? You always want the paper prototype before you start coding, because it's very easy to correct things with a Sharpie. It can be a lot harder to do things in the code. So you want a paper prototype to start with and then build from there. And there's always some smart ass in the back of class who goes, "Hey, you do a paper prototype for a first-person shooter." And so wham, and you drop a Lost Worlds book on them, and they're like, "Oh my God, what do you mean?" And so suddenly, hey, the first-person shooter, and it's not so much that you want them to have to figure out like all the physics angles ahead of time. Like, that's why you use the computer. But this is what your interface should look like as the player. What is the player going to see when he's looking on the screen? Draw it by hand first before you ever start putting something in, what goes in the top left, what goes in the top right. And, give us that interface, but show us what it's going to look like. And whenever some smartass always starts off with, how you do a paper prototype for first-person shooter, this is exactly how you do it. And there were, they had BattleTech books, they had the Lost Worlds books, they had, I think it was a pirate themed one. They had obviously all the different air combat ones.
There was a cowboy one.
Yeah. Cowboy one. A ton of different stuff. Right. It's the same basic system that you're reskinning. Once you've figured out the math of what all the angles look like, whether you're doing World War I biplane dogfighting or space dogfighting, the angle is the angle, right? This is what the other guy looks like when you're above at 60 degrees and 40 degrees. Your angle and deflection there. That's the view. You change your artwork, obviously, but it's I think that is so dramatically different than any board game experience. It's obviously an analog game experience, but I think it is so dramatically different than any board game experience. It's like comparing, apples to dishwashers. It's just not even in the same class.
Byron, you started this one off by, we want to talk about war games, but as we close this one down, I'm going to throw this question to you, and I'm going to try not to answer it myself, but you came to this topic because you have a passion for air war games. What do you see in our closing minutes here? What do you see as the future? What do you see as the future? What do you hope for the future of air war gaming?
I think that the playability of, I think any air war game that's going to come out in the future is going to always be based on, is this a fair, fun, and balanced air war game for all the people that are investing their time, money, energy, effort into it? And I think that there's going to be like the minis games, like there continue to come up with new source books for Check Your Six. Blood Red Skies is, it's marginally in there, like it's a game that happens in here, but I don't consider it, like it isn't a turn and burn kind of game. So I think what a lot of the stuff we're going to see in the future, or what I see is a focus on playability. I just don't see that many companies wanting to throw a lot of money at more complex air games. And especially, how many more World War I air games do we need? And there's not, if you go to War Game Vault, we made references to things like Wings of War. Well, there's a guy that came up with a nice portable game called Table Air Combat, and where it's the whole game. It's a print and play game. There's every airplane has a different, if you will, a wing, and you move your counters around. You can buy yourself an entire Air Force for $5. You build yourself an entire Air Force for $5. You can take it anywhere. You can wrap it up in an 8.5 by 11 manila envelope and game to your heart's content. It's not accurate. It's flat space gaming, but boy, it can be fun when you're playing with it. So I think that's where we're going to. I think I think the minis market, and especially the 3D, how 3D printing makes it easy to print airplanes. I think a lot more stuff we're going to be seeing is leaning that way. How about you?
Well, I said I wasn't going to answer that. Yeah, I agree that I agree, and we've made this point over and over again that if you want the complexity, go play video games. If you want the verisimilitude and you want to get the narrative and the story of air warfare, sit down with a tabletop war game.
Yeah.
But don't go get Birds of Prey. You'll just get frustrated. Like Brant said early on. I mean, just find the one that's going to tell you the story, and that's going to bring you up in scale. It's going to bring you up in a level of extraction, but it's going to build you a rich story, and that's for playability and the enjoyment of the story. I think that's the future, and I think we're in a good place. We got some good publishers out there that are doing that, and I think we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I remembered finally that question I forgot when we talked a little bit, and we can consider this over. But the comment I was going to make about the complexity of modern air warfare, we talked about ECM and how all that plays. There was a computer game that I bought that even the computer, like I wanted to like this, and it got too complex for me, was the John Tiller Air Power series, War Over Vietnam and War Over the Mideast. I bought War Over Vietnam, and I had the idea that, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to plan strikes and all kinds of stuff. And again, I couldn't believe how incredibly complicated this was. It was way too much for my two-dimensional mind to figure it out. And again, also completely not overwhelmed, but in awe of the role that things like ECM and AWACS plays in this whole equation. Two great titles, though. I mean, if I still every now and then drag it out and try it out a little bit, but
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground tonight would be sort of insulting the aviation side of this.
Wah, 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 wah.
We've certainly covered a lot of airspace. I'm trying to think of a metaphor.
Yeah, we've covered it at indicated airspeed anywhere from about 80 miles an hour to Mach 2, maybe.
We've flown a sufficient combat air patrol over the topic.
Exactly.
I don't know, Rocky, help me out. What's a good metaphor here? Because to say we cover ground
next
loiter, we're bingo fuel on.
We're bingo now. Let's head back to the barn.
Fair enough. No, this is cool. I like it when you guys bring topics to the table that are things that other folks get to pontificate about, not just because it's a little easier for me to not have to talk as much on the show, but because I love doing the podcast where I get to learn a bunch, and that's always nice. And so I appreciate you guys bringing that to the table tonight, and thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Audience, thank you very much for sticking with us through this episode and being here as a part of the Mentioned in Dispatches family. Again, like we've noted a couple of times before, we really appreciate all the folks that have jumped onto the Patreon, and not just the ones that we shout out that are up at that regimental captain level, but the folks that are supporting us at any level that you're able to support. The thing that we would definitely ask on Mentioned in Dispatches in particular, because the podcast hosting platforms like iTunes or Amazon or Overcast or Spotify or whatever, Pocket Casts, those recommendation engines are driven based on not just what what, if any, kind of rating you give us, but the fact that you give us one at all. And so it's, showing that level of engagement is what helps drive those recommendation engines. So if you haven't already, please go give us, whatever vote you think is fair. We'd love some 5 stars, but we're not going to sit here and beg for it. I mean, Rocky might beg for them. I'm not going to beg for them, but please give us a vote, give us a comment, give us whatever, so that the recommendation engines realize people are paying attention and this is something that's got a little traction, and we start to bubble up a little more in those recommendations, and more folks can hear the content, which is ultimately what we're doing all this for. We enjoy sitting around and having a chat on games, and that's kind of our shtick, is let's go have a conversation about games and hit record. But the whole point of this is, let's get it out there. Let's let other people find it and listen and hear it and, see it from there. Feel free to share it on your own social channels and, get the word out that way. Yes, we are begging for publicity, and I'm not going to feel the least bit bad about it. So, guys, Rocky, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a busy time of year for you right now, but I appreciate you carving carving out a little time for us. And Byron, I guess we were interrupting dinner or very shortly thereafter, given the time zone shifting. But we appreciate you being able to be here for this. And we got to figure out some other time that we're able to get you in on some of these. It's just, again, juggling time zones. You got to work around that. So
exactly. Well, I think there's a tariff on my comments on your.
I was going to say, with the exchange rate, you have to talk like 60% more than
I do, just to break even.
So, for those that didn't get the memo, Byron's up north of the wall up there in Canada land. So we do have to, make the mandatory exchange rate jokes and all that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Excellent.
Audience,
Thanks, guys.
thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you being here, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Mention and Dispatches.